Could Israel's incursion into Lebanon and Iran's attack on Israel tonight lead to a wider Middle East conflict? And what could be the security and the economic implications for Israel, the region and the West?
Alistair, Burt.
Well, Scott, how long have you got? You are asking the fundamental question quite rightly that we all are. I'll start by saying that there have always been restraints against the possibility of a wider war. Let me give you two or three. Firstly, before October the 7th, a number of states in the region were working more closely together. The Saudis had reached out to the Iranians had reached out to the UAE. There was the prospect of them taking more regional decisions. They were moving away from the Americans telling everybody what to do and making their own decisions. There were, of course, the efforts to bring relations with Israel rather closer. There was a different sort of Middle East. October the 7th has changed absolutely everything. But most of the states, almost all the states, none of them can achieve their objectives for their economies and their peoples if there is a significant regional war, which will be massively destructive. And those restraints are still there. Iran has had a number of attacks launched against it in the recent past. The assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, on Iranian soil, the loss of the killing of some of their top military commanders. And their response has been relatively muted because their options are quite limited. They know that an all-out attack on Israel would lead to significant reprisals, which they're not going to be strong enough to withstand. The risk of the missile barrage, of course, is that if one lands in a significant civilian area, if there's a loss of Israeli civilian lives, Israel has made it very clear that that changes the picture altogether. It could be that this missile attack has been a little bigger, but not dissimilar to the one in April that was knocked back by others, and they may feel that enough's enough. And I agree with Sam. If people just accept at present that there's been a bit more of a tit for tat, a bit more extreme, but then start talking about what they need to talk about, maybe we can move on from here. But the risk of miscalculation is significant.
And that's what often causes wider conflict, isn't it? The miscalculation by just one of the participants.
Yes.
Rachel Shabi.
Well, the thing that needs to happen, as Alistair, I'm assuming, suggests, is a ceasefire, of course. The political option was only ever the only option, right from the start. October 7, yes, but obviously going back decades, there was only ever one solution, and that was political. And the trouble is here that we have an Israeli government that is out of control. It's hard to look at this situation and not see that Israel is being the irrational actor in this.
How is it irrational? I mean, they had to respond, surely, to the Hezbollah rockets that were being fired over. They've done it in a very different way than they did in Gaza. It seems to be much more targeted. They couldn't have just sat back and done nothing, could they?
I don't think anything that you just said is true. I think is, of course, Israeli citizens should be able to go and live in the north where 60,000 have been evacuated. Of course, that's obvious. The question is, how do you go about that? Israel's pager attacks on Lebanon were, even according to a former CIA head, an act of terror. The invasion,
they were targeted at Hezbollah terrorists.
That was not a targeted attack.
Yes, it was. They were all of the pages.
Well, if you're going to keep interrupting me, I'm not going to be able to actually say anything.
I mean, if you say something which I think is wrong, I'm going to say just as you're saying things
the former head of the CIA has said unquestioningly those were a terror attack. If you booby trap a load of pagers and other devices to go off randomly in public areas, then inevitably people are going to get injured, innocent people, and that's exactly what happened. Thousands of people were injured. And then you look at taking out Hassan Nasrallah, which was just an epic bombardment, use of bombs in civilian areas that are...
Their headquarters were under the building that was bombed.
I don't care. It doesn't justify that epic loss of life. This is a civilian area in the middle of a large functioning city, just like any other large functioning city. You do not get to pulverize and terrorize innocent people like that.
Well, surely you should be condemning Hezbollah from having their headquarters in that kind of area.
But where does that end? One could condemn the British Army for having its headquarters in Downing Street. It's a ridiculous argument. You cannot go after civilians in the way that Israel just did. It is anyone with a moral compass can see that that is wrong. And what we're left with here in this situation, with you responding in the way that you're responding, is that we have Lebanese people and Palestinian people who have been killed and maimed and terrorized in such epic proportions, reduced to the indignity of pleading for you to see their humanity.
Well, I think it's very interesting that you, in your various answers there, you haven't condemned Hezbollah once. All of your fire has been targeted on Israel.
It should be obvious. I am not going to sit here and be a cheerleader for Hezbollah, not for its indiscriminate bombardment of Israel. Certainly lots of people in Syria are no big fans of Hezbollah after they helped Bashar al-Assad maim and target and kill and starve civilian people. And it's worth saying as well that a big chunk of Lebanon are no big fans of Hezbollah either. But that's not the issue here. The issue here who is being the regional aggressor. Who has been bombarding Gaza to such an epic degree? Oxfam just released today a survey that said that more women and children were killed in Gaza by Israel than any other recent conflict in a single year. It is horrifying. It is apocalyptic.
Okay.
And what is your response to that? What is our response to that?
I'm not here to give my response to that. I'm here to question you, which is what I hope I've done. Sarah Olney.
Well, I think the only thing that we can say with kind of any certainty is that whenever there is, an escalation of violence like this, the only thing you can be certain of is that there's going to be severe civilian innocent lives lost, and that has obviously been the situation over the last 12 months. And that's why the Liberal Democrats have been calling from a very early stage for an immediate bilateral ceasefire in Gaza, between Israel and Gaza. That's why we've been extremely concerned about the escalation of hostilities that we've seen over the last week in Lebanon. We have called on the Foreign Secretary. We've repeated our calls for an immediate bilateral ceasefire. What we want to see, I think, and we've been calling for this for a long time, we've recognised that Iran playing a very, very destabilising role in the region. And what we want to see in this country is that the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, be proscribed. And I think it's long past time that happened, to send a very, very clear message.
Why hasn't it, do you think?
I don't know is the quick answer to that. I have a lot of British Iranian constituents. It's something that I have been engaging with for a number of years now, speaking to my Iranian constituents about their experiences, about their contacts still in Iran, about in particular things that have been happening over the last few years. The death of Mahsa Amini, for example. It felt a few years ago that was going to be the start of perhaps a new beginning in Iran, that might be the time when ordinary people, women in particular, were able to start having a voice, and that seems to have receded a little bit. But I really want the UK to be at the forefront of pushing for
and how fearful are you? I mean, let's go back to Scott's question. How fearful are you that this could lead to a wider Middle East conflict?
Extremely fearful. And as I say, the only thing we know about when there is an escalation of violence is that innocent people are going to lose their lives. And I think the international community is pretty much united in saying there must be a ceasefire, because there's only one certain outcome. And as you were saying yourself, it's very much, it's so finely balanced at the moment, and one wrong move could be, absolutely, devastating. So that's why, the Liberal Democrats are very clear and have been clear for a long time that we want to see a ceasefire.
Sam Kiley, how much do you fear a wider conflict?
That would I fear it because the consequences would be ghastly. For the people in the region, I don't think it's a particularly problematic to Great Britain in a strategic sense. It certainly doesn't compare to the dangers being unfolding or somewhat ignored at the moment in Ukraine. But I think that whether or not it escalates it significantly will really depend on the relative military power and the assessments thereof. This boils down to kind of gruesomely calculating moments of leadership and generalship in which the different sides work out whether or not, they can actually win. At the moment, it would appear, particularly with the backing inevitably of the United States, which has been reiterated since these Iranian attacks on Israel, that Israel has the upper hand. It may therefore give Israel enough confidence to hold its line at this point and go no further. That will depend on the extent to which, even privately, they come under pressure from the United States. And that, I think, is the real issue here, is whether or not the Biden administration is prepared to put that pressure on, particularly in these dying days of an electoral campaign.